Okay, so the last one was a bit propedeutic. However, this one may be short. I don't know. May be short. Because the main example from transparency about sentences from one's personal life, this is the paradigmatic example for our time. And I've never seen an example like this. And it is exactly instantiating the ethos that I am inquiring of. Okay? Now, anybody who subscribes to HBO or Hulu or probably any provider will see a section in your your streamer schedule or whatever, where you watch all your shit, you will see a section that says Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And when I say section, I mean section, because there are documentaries, if that's what they're called, news exposés, Dateline style, gossip columns masquerading as documentary. But, okay, so facts are facts, sentences are sentences. So whether or not they're documentaries, they're moving images on the screen and they involve Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And there is a comment about the recordings, because there are loads of recordings of them arguing. Amber and Heard and Depp. I will be more formal. Heard and Depp. Tons of archival material of them arguing. How did this happen? Well, says a psychiatrist, they made jointly, I don't know exact, and I should cite it particularly, so apologies for my being sloppy about this. But I'm telling you, it's like it was on an HBO one, I think. The psychiatrist, as we're listening or about to listen to one of these crazy argument recordings, the doctor says Heard and Depp decided, because they were in some form of therapy or couples counseling, they decided at some point, maybe under the doctor that they were talking to, the therapist, under the doctor's guidance, I think that it was suggested, they decided, they did agree that any argument, or at least some defined set of arguments, I guess they didn't argue about which ones were going to be recorded. Right? They were really on the same page about whether the argument should be recorded. And the doctor says, well, it's kind of unusual. But the argument in favor of it was they decided that maybe they could learn from the recordings. This is my thesis. Now, the Heard-Depp case represents a limit. It is the intuitive limit that anybody who listens to me talk feels, but might not be able to articulate, which is fine. But it's something like this. Just listen to them. This is argument. The argument is as follows, okay? Listen to Heard and Depp destroy each other. by means of these recordings, right? So if you think that I want any part of that, dude, you're dreaming. I think that's probably roughly the intuition. You figure, well, if anything I say can and will be used against me, I have the right to remain silent in ordinary discourse. Not after being taken by under duress and imprisoned. I have the right to remain silent in ordinary discourse. And of course, that's true. That's guaranteed by the First Amendment, if not human decency. So then why did Heard and Depp do it? Well, they're crazy Hollywood people. They're on a lot of drugs. Well, at least Depp is. Who knows? A lot of drugs. It's all crazy. A lot of trauma. We know something about how Johnny Depp grew up. There's some account of this. And it seems to me that the behavior is fairly consistent with the formative account. I'm sure that they go into some equal amount of detail about Amber Heard's upbringing, but the point is in order to become crazy, beautiful, flamboyant Hollywood people like that, I think that probably your formative years, one way or another, I mean, it's not just due to being gorgeous. It's your formative years, somehow they do something to you, and they put you in a certain structural position in relation to the world. I think that's a lot to do with it too. So what I'm getting at is that clearly, and it's just mentioned in passing, of course they were in therapy and everything. I mean, clearly both individuals, Heard and Depp, are interested in self-inquiry. I mean, we can even concede, let's suppose that any number of really upsetting, name-calling type mudslinging words are true of both individuals. Let's say they're narcissists, or they're selfish, or they're egomaniacs, or they're delusional, or whatever, or they're selfish, or whatever. I don't think that it's very easy to dismiss the idea that they're interested in self-inquiry, each one of them in their own way. I don't think that there's any way that they're recording their arguments, that they're both agreeing to record their arguments, unless each one of them individually has their own reason for it. Okay, so it goes bad. It's like the paradigmatic limit case or limit example. I always forget limit case. It's limit. The limit case is the one where it's the negation of the case, right? And the limit itself is just the final case before the limit is crossed. I don't know. Anyway, you get the point. There's limit, and then there's limit case. And it's one or the other. I don't know. You could probably make various interpretations that it's the one or the other. I don't know. Limit or limit case. What do we do? And I guess this is some kind of a moral question, but it's also a logical question, I'm sure. It's a game theoretic question. I mean, you could probably solve it game theoretically by just conceptualizing some immediately absurd consequence of imagine an immediately absurd consequence of oversharing What? What am I getting at? I mean, yeah, I'm not going to get into the weeds about how there's logical dimension and a moral dimension. I'm just suggesting that there is. That it's not an entirely moral proposition, because moral philosophy is notoriously impossible, but logical philosophy actually can secure some ground. We can at least secure some ground of discourse that we can entertain as hypothetically axiomatic. So, but we think the Heard DEPP case as the let's call it the horizon. You know, it sets really the horizon of how culture and society can conceptualize oversharing. Because when oversharing becomes a commonsensically, plausibly legal matter, if you're going to suppose that your speech at various times in your life is going to count as testimony, chances are you're going to resist it. Only crazy philosophers who are crazy or half crazy can imagine all manner of oversharing and not really having any qualms about it, simply because I'm almost completely transparent about my life, totally. And so because of the fact that I've practiced externalizing and symbolizing statements that may, if I had decided to keep them private, I may have had qualms about them being, so let's say, weaponized against me, right? But I can't have those qualms anymore because it's like public knowledge, right? Anything that's public knowledge, like, who gives a shit? There is nothing to hide. I mean, the idea of the weaponization, the kind of co-mutual weaponization going on between Heard and DEPP, there's part logical, part game theoretic, but it's also it's like a frenzy of variable binding. I mean, because you've got intoxicated people yelling at each other, and probably they just had sex or they're going to have sex, or, it's just impossibly libidinal and physiological and endocrinological and neurological and all the rest. I don't think that it really is, personally, it's my feeling that it's not really so much the transparency of whatever it is that they're arguing about, so much as it is that there is now a material archive that each of the parties feels like they have to dogmatically represent in a one-sided way, perhaps. So it's the danger of hard, concrete evidence being dogmatically appropriated. I think that is the true qualm, and it is a justified qualm. And I don't know what the answer is. And I think one thing's for damn sure, I'm going to learn everything I possibly can about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard business, because, this is what I've been yammering on about. Basically my thesis is this. If you take all of our political, cultural problems, right? And you do exactly what Johnny Depp and Amber Heard did. You just agree with whoever. And of course, podcasts do this, right? But private citizens don't. But like hypothetically, let's just agree that two private citizens notice that they have some disagreement. Let's say that I have a disagreement with J.D. Vance. He's a Catholic and I'm a Byzantine, okay? So somehow we cross paths and we both give each other enough attention or time of day to worry about each other's position. I know it'll never happen. But he's a Catholic and I'm a Byzantine, okay? Yeah. So let's suppose that there's all kinds of archive of he and I arguing. I mean, that's a stupid example because I don't want, let's use a different example. I mean, let's say it's somebody I already know. I don't know. Let's say it's my mother, right? Okay. Because she doesn't like the idea of being, her ordinary speech being held as testimony one bit. And anyway, dogmatic appropriation of anything at all, of, material, I mean, in this sense, consider the, what's her first name? Ms. Good, the peace be upon her, from Minneapolis, who was shot in the face by an ICE agent. You have all manner of hard material archive there, video footage, being appropriated by the side of the government defending ICE, seeing, look, the evidence is right there that we're in the right? So evidence doesn't really speak of itself. What evidence counts for is that it just means that it represents a certain chunk of reality that has to be incorporated into the discourse. And if you've got two sides that are facing off against each other, that you got no question that each one, if they're at all, conceptually oriented. I mean, of course, Trump won't do this. He doesn't keep track of his statements. But if you've got people that have signed on to, everything that all these recorded arguments, we're actually listening to them because we want to learn from them. Which is that's the de jure line from Hurd and DEPP. Depth. That's a bad slip. Hurd and depth. Hurd and DEPP. I don't know what a DEPP is, but I guess I know what depth is. So it's Hurd and depth. There's probably like some Narcissus Echo thing. I wonder which is which. Well, that's combinatorics. Dear Professor Trieste. Well, now I'm just yammering on. You see what you see the qualm, but these are the stakes, and I appreciate the severity of the stakes, but I hope that at least a bit of my argument is appreciated, that if you've got talking heads on the screen, if you've got a whole bunch of people like Scott Jennings on the screen going blah, 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 and they're saying jack shit, and they're not being held to any of their statements, and they're not even speaking as though they want to be held to their statements, then that means a little bit of the ethos that I'm talking about, basically open up Gottlob Frege, realize how utterly foundational the sentence is, and start holding people to the words that they use. Then we'll be led down the line and we'll hit the limit, which is the Hurd-DEPP limit. And then hopefully by then, some other thinkers will have come in and given some suggestions on how to incorporate more of this personal transparency without it running into the danger of being exposed to the possible dogmatic appropriation by people that would want to use it against us. Right? Right. Thank you for your attention to this matter.